Sharp nose, thin eyebrows, slightly droopy cheeks, faint blue eyes. Kalangos examined himself in the mirror. He was certain that he looked no different from the unconscious man. After he rehearsed a few of the man's gestures, he bent down to drag the man off the ground and shoved him into a wardrobe. Then he extended his right hand. With an audible snap, he broke the man's neck. Kalangos took out his handkerchief and wiped his hands before closing the wardrobe door. He slowly walked back to the mirror, wore a black double-breasted suit, tied a bow tie and raised a bottle of amber-colored cologne. He dripped a few drops on his wrist, then dabbed them over himself. Kalangos tidied his hair in front of the mirror, then walked out of the room. He clasped his hands and told his butler who was waiting outside, "Don't let anyone enter my room. I'm keeping something very important in there." "Yes, Baron." The balding butler pressed his hand against his chest and bowed. "Your carriage and personal servant is waiting downstairs. Duke Negan's invitation card is there as well." Maintaining the Baron's mannerisms, Kalangos nodded indiscernibly. He walked towards the stairs in an arrogant manner under the company of his butler. A baron who is riddled in debt to the point of not wanting to hire a normal security guard, has actually maintained his hiring of a butler, personal male servant, 2 attendants, 2 first-grade maidservants, for second-grade maidservants, 2 laundry female workers, 1 carriage driver, 1 stablemaster, 1 gardener, 1 chef and 1 sous chef. To these foolish nobles, dignity really is everything. I even had to waste some of my time to learn the strange pronunciations and so-called noble slang. Kalangos thought to himself in disdain. Backlund, Sherwood Backlund. In a particular cramped apartment. Zio Dericha sat cross-legged on a bed and looked at Furswall, who was reading a novel with the light from the window. This is so disappointing. Kalangos didn't leave any clues behind. We still haven't figured out what he's trying to do in Backlund. They had acted according to their initial plan and lodged a police report. Then they secretly sent a letter to the local police station and described the strange situation at the crime scene in detail. They also mentioned that the suspect could be Kalangos. The police station responded as they had predicted. The policemen were very careful and they transferred the case directly to the mandated punishers. After a day's time, the news that Rear Admiral Hurricane had sneaked into Backlund was widely spread among all enforcement teams. Zio and Furs also left the place they originally rented and hid to investigate in secret. They didn't want to be brought back to the police station to help with the official investigation. The mandated punishers, Nighthawks and Machinery Hive Mind were all hostile towards non-official Beyonders. The churches viewed them as potential criminals. Hence, not only were Zio and Furs avoiding the possibility of Kalangos's pursuit, but they were also hiding from the enforcement authorities. If we could discover his purpose so easily, Kalangos would have been buried in a cemetery long ago, and the tombstone would be covered in weeds, Furs replied casually. We need to wait patiently. As long as the authorities continue to take this much interest in him, Kalangos will definitely make a mistake. I've got to say I'm quite envious of a mystical item that can allow one to change appearances. Zio hugged her knees and looked out the window. I'm just worried that Kalangos will take action soon and then flee from Backlund before anyone can respond. If that happens, I don't know when I'll be able to advance to Sequence 8. Let alone Sequence 6 or Sequence 5. She paused and muttered as her mind spaced out. I don't know when I'll be able to take back the things that belong to our family. It's been almost a year since I last saw my younger brother. Furs gave her a comforting smile. When you fulfill your wishes, please allow me to write your experiences into a story. It would definitely be an interesting and exciting one. I actually find Miss Audrey very generous. Even if Kalangos escapes, I think she'll still reward us handsomely. We've been busying ourselves for so long after all, and we've even caused Kalangos to appear. I hope so. Sai, why can't I have any fortuitous encounters? Zio grabbed her shoulder-length blonde hair. Furs frowned and said, In the Beyonder world, fortuitous encounters are usually accompanied with danger. I have yet to figure out what the ravings we hear during the full moon mean, or if they will result in negative changes. Fortuitous encounters without dangers may exist, but they are very, very rare. It's difficult for your wish to be fulfilled, unless we receive the favors from an orthodox deity or the attention of some friendly hidden existence. However, it would be hard for us to tell if it was really an evil god or devil in disguise. Zio sat straight and drew a crimson moon on her chest. May the goddess watch over me. Duke Negan was in his mansion located in Backland, Empress Borough, where he was hosting a grand ball. There were two parts of the mansion. One was the dancing hall located on the ground floor, which was covered with glamorous stone slabs carved with complicated patterns. There was the Duke's excellent ensemble playing music in a corner. Up the stairs, there was a winding corridor that circled the hall located on the second floor. The guests were holding their glasses, leaning against the railing, overlooking the people dancing on the ground floor as though they were enjoying a fencing match from the stands. Occasionally, a gentleman would walk before a lady or his wife to invite them to dance. If the invitation was accepted, both of them would walk down the stairs hand in hand and enter the hall. On the far side of the corridor there were doors after doors. They were rooms that had been allocated to the guests as their resting quarters. But behind a French door was a corridor, and on both sides of the corridor were various gypsum statues. They were all the ancestors of the Negan family. At the end of the corridor was another hall which could see the ball. Long tables were covered with a variety of delicious food and fine wine, and another ensemble belonging to the Duke was playing relaxing melodies for the guests. In the hall, the guests were gathering in groups. Some were seated and some stood around chatting about all kinds of matters. Those who wished to get away from the frivolities for a while would go to the attached balconies to overlook the garden and enjoy the crimson moon in the sky. After participating in the opening dance, Audrey Hall stood on the second floor above the dancing hall and stared at the candles on the huge crystal chandeliers hanging from the rooftop in a daze. However, she noticed that many young men were appearing to pump themselves up to come over and invite her for a dance. So she wisely left the place and went to the corridor that connected to the dining hall. How boring, but my attendance is necessary. Sigh, can't they just let me observe in silence? I have to say, some people have rich facial expressions when they dance. They remind me of animals seeking mates. Audrey lowered her head, looked at the tips of her feet, and walked in a straight line out of boredom. Just then the corner of her eyes caught an approaching figure. She slowed down, stood straight, and instantly became the elegant yet quiet Miss Hall. "Good day, Baron Grammer," Audrey greeted with a flawless smile and etiquette. Baron Grammer had thin eyebrows and faint blue eyes. He smiled and bowed. "Nice to meet you again, Miss Hall. You are the brightest and most dazzling gemstone at this ball." After exchanging a few words, Baron Grammer headed for the dancing hall while Audrey continued approaching the dining hall. After a few steps, she suddenly frowned. There was puzzlement in her green eyes. Baron Grammer isn't the same as before. In the past, when he sees a pretty lady or madam of a higher rank than he is, and one that's relatively prettier, he would look to the side without looking at them directly. Then he would steal glances constantly. But today he appears very confident. Also, his cologne smells off. In the numerous parties in the past, his body would emit the final note of the amber cologne fragrance, musky yet faint, not ostentatious yet elegant. In other words, he would spray the cologne a few hours earlier to let the front and middle notes disperse before the gathering. But just now his cologne was amber and middle note, rich and refined. Audrey slowed down her footsteps. As a spectator who had completely digested her potion, her sensitivity towards details wasn't anything other Beyonders could compare to. Suddenly she thought of a possibility. Her green crystal-clear eyes froze. It couldn't be Kalangos in a disguise, right? The creeping hunger has the power to change a person's appearance. The more Audrey thought about it, the more possible it seemed. She felt uptight as she turned nervous and panicky. If he really was Rear Admiral Hurricane, what is he trying to do? It's a pity that I can't bring Susie to the ball. Otherwise, I could ask her to observe Baron Grammar. No way, I have to warn father. Amidst her frantic thoughts, Audrey quickened her pace and entered the dining hall. She found Count Hall, who was talking to the chief cabinet secretary and others. She flashed a flawless smile and walked over. She held Count Hall by his arm and told the others, "Gentlemen, do you mind if I borrow Count Hall for a few minutes?" "Beautiful lady, it's your right," the few gentlemen said in a friendly response. Audrey held Count Hall by his arm and moved to the nearest balcony. They found a quiet, uninhabited corner, and she said to her middle-aged father, who was getting plump, "Father, I have something to tell you." Count Hall was smiling fondly at his daughter, but he got serious when he saw her serious facial expression. "What's the matter?" "I ran into Baron Grammar earlier, but there are things about him that are different from the past. For instance, his cologne was in the middle note of the amber fragrance. It used to be the end note. And," Audrey continued with the things that she found different. "It could be explained as being sensitive and meticulous." After she described what she had noticed, she weighed her words and added, "I heard from Viscount Glaint that Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos has the ability to take on other people's appearance. Hasn't he been in Backland recently?" Count Hall listened to her carefully, and his face grew abnormally grave. But he soon flashed a smile and comforted his anxious daughter. "I'll take care of this. Go look for your mother and stay with her. She's at the lounge in this hall." "Okay." Audrey nodded obediently. On the way back to the lounge, she turned around and looked at her father. She saw that Count Hall was talking to another noble softly, and he wore a rather solemn look. Audrey couldn't help but feel anxious. She felt that she needed to do something to make sure that her father, mother, and brother didn't get hurt. She surveyed the area and changed the direction in which she was heading in. She left the dining hall and found Duke Negan's small prayer room. She pushed the door closed and locked it behind her. She looked at the symbol of the Lord of Storms before her and subconsciously found a remote and dark corner. Audrey sat down with her body leaning forward. She clasped her hands together into a praying position and supported her forehead. Then she recited softly in Hermes, "The fool that doesn't belong to this era, you are the mysterious ruler above the gray fog. You are the king of yellow and black who wields good luck." Tingen City, Daffodil Street. Klein was discussing the latest play with Benson and Melissa and was inviting them to watch it at the theater next weekend. "I think the newspapers have said enough about it. The Return of the Count is definitely a play that's worth watching. It's already been performed more than 10 times in Backland and it's sold out each time. I think that we shouldn't miss this opportunity." Klein, who had lacked sources of entertainment, was unwilling to give up. After all, he had been an ardent follower of television shows back on Earth. "Of course, if it wasn't for the maintenance of my image, I'd rather go to a bar and play billiards. Yes, renting a venue for tennis isn't a bad choice. That can be considered as it's a leisure sport for the middle class. With my current fitness, as long as I don't encounter other beyonders, I should be able to handle most opponents easily. Forget it, it can only be a passing thought for now. I still have to reinvestigate the figures associated with Lenivis in the morning, go for combat training in the afternoon, and search for the house with the red chimney in the evening before returning home. I sure am a busy man." Klein tried to remain optimistic. Noticing that Benson was inclined towards his suggestion while Melissa was still a little hesitant, Klein smiled as he added, "I heard that the most popular supporting cast in The Return of the Count is a genius mechanic. All right, we do have to see a play at a large theater once in our lives." Melissa pouted and nodded her head grudgingly, but there was now a sparkle in her eyes. Klein was about to respond when he heard a buzzing in his ears. He became dizzy for a few seconds. "Someone is praying to me." He supported his back with his right hand and chuckled. "Then I shall wait patiently for the tickets to go on sale. All right, I'll be returning to my bedroom to write up a report. We also have to plunge into the sea of knowledge and hope that we don't drown." Benson let out a self-deprecating laugh as he returned to the dining room with Melissa. Klein went to the second floor and locked the door to his room. He sealed the room with a wall of spirituality, then he took 4 steps counterclockwise as he recited the incantations, returning to the world above the gray fog. His figure suddenly appeared at the seat of honor in the magnificent palace fit for a giant. A pulsing crimson star reflected in his eyes. Klein lifted his right hand and extended his spirituality, establishing a connection with the star representing justice. With a boom, he saw a blurred, distorted image. He saw Miss Justice in a long beige regal dress sitting on a chair in a dark corner. Her head was bowed, her hands clasped. At the same time, her still nascent and nervous voice stacked in an illusory manner, reverberating around the space. The fool that doesn't belong to this era. You are the mysterious ruler above the gray fog. You are the king of yellow and black who wields good luck. I pray for your attention. I pray for you to listen. I'm at a ball held by Duke Negan and encountered someone who's suspected to be Kalangos. He is disguising himself as Baron Grammar and his motives are unclear. I noticed today that some of the details regarding Baron Grammar were a little different than usual. This made me recall the appearance-altering beyonder power that Kalangos's mystical item has. Klein listened seriously and carefully interpreted what was happening. Finally, he understood what Miss Justice was describing. Kalangos has actually used the special powers of creeping hunger to infiltrate Duke Negan's ball. But Kalangos probably didn't expect that one of the ladies at the ball is a spectator. A spectator who has committed the mannerisms of Baron Grammar to memory. Hence, he doesn't realize that he's been exposed. What does Kalangos want? And what should I do? I've tried conducting the sacrificial ritual without spirituality-infused materials over the past 2 days and realized that I can create something like the Door of Summoning, but I'm unable to open it. I was going to find some time to purchase some materials with spirituality in the underground market to prepare for my second experiment. Miss Justice definitely wouldn't have spirituality-infused materials when she's attending a ball. Klein thought for more than 10 seconds before beginning his response to Justice's prayer. In a small prayer room in Duke Negan's mansion, Audrey repeated her prayers a few times before finally stopping. She tidied her clothes and walked quickly to the door. She knew that she couldn't be gone for too long because her parents would worry about her and thus misjudge the situation. It would cause them to react in the wrong way. Standing behind the door, Audrey took a deep breath, extended her right hand which was covered in a white veiled glove, and released the lock with a wary heart. After leaving the small prayer room, she followed the path back to the dining hall. She saw the figures holding wine glasses and plates get closer when her vision suddenly turned blurry. She realized that an illusory fog was spreading into the surroundings. In the middle of the thick wide fog was an ancient chair, and atop the chair was a mysterious presence. A mysterious presence that seemed to overlook everything. Mr. Fool. Audrey almost shouted in pleasant surprise. She then heard a deep, familiar voice. I'm aware. The voice reverberated around the space as the fog vanished. Audrey's vision was still filled with images of the long tables of food and wine, as well as the bustling sights of interacting guests. The worry and unease in her heart vanished as she subconsciously straightened her back and entered the dining hall with light steps. She walked toward the recreation room in the dining hall. In the magnificent palace in the world of fog, Klein started to think about how to convey the message to the hanged man after finishing his reply to Miss Justice. I cannot just repeat the description to him since it undermines my authority. After all, what mysterious existence would personally take on the role of a messenger? He deliberated for nearly a minute before an idea came to him. He conjured the scene of Miss Justice praying and transformed it into something akin to a movie scene with the faces mosaicked and censored. He then extended his hand and tapped, launching the scene into the crimson star representing the hanged man. Backlund, Sherwood Backlund. At the Holy Wind Cathedral. The hanged man, Alger Wilson, was going through the investigation reports in a simple room, trying to find traces of Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos. Near his right hand was a stack of paper filled with many contorted symbols. Just as Alger was leaning back in his chair and rubbing his eyes, he saw his field of vision turn blurry. His line of sight was filled with thick gray fog. There was an ancient chair which seemed to exist eternally, deep within the endless fog. Atop the chair was a faint human figure. Mr. Fool. Just as this thought came to Alger, he saw that another hazy figure in a regal dress within the grayish-white fog. She was in a praying position, repeating, "I'm at a ball held by Duke Negan and encountered someone who's suspected to be Kalangos. He is disguising himself as Baron Grammar and his motives are unclear. I noticed today that some of the details regarding Baron Grammar were a little different than usual. This made me recall the appearance-altering beyonder power that Kalangos's mystical item has." Alger was shocked at first, then let out a look of pleasant surprise. He pressed his palm against his chest and lowered his head. "Praise you, Mr. Fool." Everything he saw or heard vanished before he finished his sentence as if nothing had happened. Staring at the desk strewn with Emperor Roselle's diary pages and his investigation reports, Alger's pupils constricted as he realized how powerful the Fool was once again. This was the Holy Wind Cathedral, once the headquarters of the Church of the Lord of Storms. Even though that was history from more than 1,000 years ago, many believers still viewed this place as sacred. But Mr. Fool could still descend upon this space without warning and give a reply. After nearly 20 seconds of silence, Alger gathered his stuff and exited the room. He was going to look for one of the cardinals of the Church of the Lord of Storms, the Archbishop of the Backland Diocese, Spellsinger of God, Ace Snake. For Alger Wilson, being able to kill Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos personally was the best course of action, but if he was unable to do that, guaranteeing that he was really dead was also acceptable in his book. After forwarding Miss Justice's description to the hanged man, Klein left the mysterious world above the gray fog and returned to his bedroom. While he was in no hurry to dispel the wall of spirituality, he sat before his desk and took out a piece of paper. He picked up a pen and began his letter. According to an urgent indication from a source, Kalangos has used the abilities of a shepherd to take on the appearance of Baron Grammar and has infiltrated Duke Negan's ball. His motives are unclear as of this moment. Klein wasn't worried that Mr. Azek would be suspicious of him or doubt why someone in Tingen would be so quick to know something that just happened in Backland, for the telegraph existed in this world. "I don't know if you would be interested in this, but I thought that I should let you know." Klein quickly ended the letter and folded the piece of paper. He then found the ancient copper whistle, brought it to his mouth and gave it a hard blow. The gigantic, terrifying and illusory skeleton messenger appeared once again, still standing at its original spot, not minding that its head was going through the ceiling. Klein fought back the urge to use the abilities of the clown to turn the letter into a flying dagger. He tossed the letter towards the messenger without a fuss. He then blew on the copper whistle once again to end the summoning. Klein collected himself and went through the events in his head once again. This was all he could do for the time being. Although Klein could also make use of the summoning ritual and bring the flaring sun charm directly to Backland, it was too dangerous for him to do so. First, Kalangos was a sequence 6 wind blessed and had with him the creeping hunger. Second, it was too troublesome. He had to first bring the flaring sun charm to the world above the gray fog. Third, his image would be affected. Thus he wisely gave up on this idea. To be honest, the problem is not too serious. Duke Negan is the most influential noble outside of the royal family, a key member behind the Conservative Party. There will be many high-ranking nobles attending the ball today. I have no doubt that there are Beyonders guarding the area. If not for this consideration, there would have been no need for him to infiltrate the place under a disguise. Since Miss Justice noticed him early, the nobles should be prepared. This incident shouldn't blow out of control. I wonder how fast Mr. Azek's messenger is? If it travels through the spirit world, Mr. Azek could still likely make it in time for the main course. But if it's as slow as Madame Daly's messenger, then he might only read about the incident in tomorrow's paper. Klein nodded indiscernibly and tossed this incident to the back of his head. After all, there was nothing more that he could do. In Duke Negan's mansion in the dancing hall, disguised as Baron Grammer, Kalangos held a glass of blood-red Ormer grape wine and casually stood behind the railing on the winding corridor on the second floor. He overlooked the people on the dance floor and enjoyed the view of the glamorously dressed ladies. However, there was no lust in his eyes. They were as calm as a frozen lake. From the corner of his eyes, he stole glances at the hanging chandelier and the nearby Duke Negan, who was looking at the beautiful figures passing by. The Duke was wearing a well-ironed navy uniform with red ribbons attached to the medals on his shoulders. He preferred to wear his military uniform on formal occasions, in remembrance of his decades of illustrious service while in the military. However, he had put on much weight since then. His once sharp gray eyes had been left turbid and filled with desire. However, he took good care of himself, as the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, lips and forehead were faint, and his black hair was still thick and luxuriant. That was Palace Negan, the current Duke Negan, the main supporter of the Conservative Party, the brother of Prime Minister Guisid, one of the richest and most powerful men in the Lone Kingdom. At the same time, he was also the reason why Kalangos had sneaked into Backlund. The thought of assassinating such an important figure makes me shiver in excitement. Kalangos retracted his gaze and closed his eyes. He was willing to accept the commission because he had been offered a sufficiently attractive price. And it was also because Kalangos loved adventure and enjoyed taking on difficult challenges. If this assassination is successful, my fame will spread across the northern and southern continents, placing me above the four kings. And I'll receive a card which contains the mystery of God that the Emperor Rosal created. Kalangos suppressed his excitement and lowered his head to examine his left hand. Creeping hunger had become transparent. It was impossible to tell that Baron Grammer was wearing a glove via the naked eye or through contact. This is such a magical item. If it wasn't for this, a Sequence 6 like me wouldn't have achieved the rank of Pirate Admiral. Thoughts flashed through his mind as bouts of regret surged within Kalangos. In his years as a pirate, he had seen and interacted with many Beyonders. Among them were members of the Aurora Order who enjoyed adventuring at the ends of the Sonia Sea. So he knew that creeping hunger was still rather different from a real shepherd. Firstly, the speed of switching states was too slow. It required at least a second, but a real shepherd could switch instantly. Secondly, the controlled soul could only use 1 to 3 abilities before the person died. As for what abilities could be used and how powerful they were, that all depended on luck. On the other hand, a real shepherd could decide on the 3 abilities. They didn't have to gamble like they were at a casino. Lastly, creeping hunger could only have 5 souls at the same time, while a real shepherd could have 7. Of course, both had the same restriction, which was that they could only control 1 soul at a time, and they could only use the soul's corresponding Beyonder powers and their own Beyonder powers. If they wanted to replace one of the souls with a new soul, the procedure would be irreversible. Kalangos went through 7 or 8 years of adjustment and finally settled with 5 souls. Their abilities complemented one another and made their owner very terrifying. Because of the constant adjustments and experimentation that he did over the years, there were rumors among the pirates that claimed that Rear Admiral Hurricane was omnipotent. During the ardent dance music, Kalangos rehearsed the subsequent actions he would take in his mind. He sighed with regret in his heart. It's a pity that I didn't find the traveler over the past few days. Otherwise, I wouldn't have to worry about anything tonight. If he had captured the woman that was most likely a traveler, Kalangos wouldn't have hesitated to feed one of the 5 souls that he was grazing to the creeping hunger. To him, a traveler's ability would be invaluable. Kalangos stole a glance at the huge crystal chandelier hanging from the rooftop and decided to wait no longer. The soul that he controlled currently had only one ability, which was to change his appearance. but it didn't possess any power to fight against other Beyonders. However, the transformation ability was still very useful, and Kalangos hadn't been willing to replace it with something else all this time. The good thing was that no matter which soul he controlled, Kalangos could use his wind-blessed Beyonder powers at the same time. Finally, he acted as though his gaze was locking onto the curvy figure of a noble's wife before he swept it towards Duke Negan and all the gentlemen around him. Duke Negan is a staunch follower of the Lord of Storms, and he is a key figure in the influence the Church of the Lord of Storms has on politics. There must be a Beyonder from the Church of the Lord of Storms beside him who's protecting him. Although the Negan family isn't an ancient 1,000-year-old family, he's one of the wealthiest and powerful men in the kingdom. He's definitely searched for sequence potion formulas in secret or hired Beyonders. Kalangos's thoughts surged. He mentally eliminated gentlemen who were nobles and officers before locking his eyes on the man who was constantly beside Duke Negan. The man was brown-haired, blue-eyed, and wearing a black tuxedo. He was almost expressionless while he remained vigilant of his surroundings constantly. Kalangos nodded indiscernibly and pressed his right hand forward slightly. Whoosh! A sudden gust of wind swept in the area above the dance floor, extinguishing the chandelier's candles. At the moment between light and darkness, while everyone's attention was drawn away, a few wind blades slashed at the same spot on a metal chain supporting the crystal chandelier geyser among the gusts of wind. Creak! With a harsh, shattering noise, the huge crystal chandelier plummeted straight to the dance floor. It made a loud crash and people screamed in surprise. Shards of debris flew, cutting guests and leaving them screaming in pain and fear. The darkened hall was suddenly full of opportunities. Kalangos's gloves squirmed and changed, condensing into a golden surface. His expression was imposing and his eyes saw through the darkness as he fixed his gaze onto the man next to Duke Negan. Suddenly, Kalangos's eyes shone like lightning. The Beyonder who was in charge of protecting Duke Negan suddenly let out a tragic scream and fell on the ground holding his head. He rolled around and struggled. With a swoosh, Kalangos's figure dashed through the darkness and charged at Duke Negan. However, in the deep recesses of his eyes, it reflected his target who didn't show any signs of panic. It was of utmost confidence. Duke Negan's plump figure stood erect on the spot and observed the incoming assassin as if he were looking down on him. He lifted his right hand and pushed forward. He murmured in ancient Hermes, "Imprison." In silence, Kalangos suddenly stopped. He was suddenly surrounded by a transparent wall, something that wrapped around him like a sticky liquid. It made him seem like an insect in amber or a prisoner in prison. The leader of the Conservative Party nobles, the hereditary Duke Palace Negan, was a Beyonder himself. A very strong Beyonder. Duke Negan spoke in a low voice again and waved his right hand. Flog. Pop, pop. Kalangos seemed to be whipped by a shapeless whip. His clothing tore from the whipping as his skin was lacerated, revealing white bone. Then Duke Negan leaned forward and held his right first. He declared in an imposing manner, "Death." Pop. His arm waved as his entire body slammed into Kalangos's head with numerous afterimages. His fist had struck his target's head in an unavoidable manner. Pop. Kalangos's head shattered, but the surroundings shattered as well. Duke Negan remained standing at his original spot. It was just a dream. It was unknown when the pirate admiral had already switched his ability and entered the nightmare state. Unlike an ordinary nightmare, he could still move his body after he dragged people into a dream. Kalangos stealthily appeared behind Duke Negan, and his cold gaze locked onto the Duke. Wrapped with high-speed spiraling winds, his right fist stabbed into the target's vest like a sharp blade. Whoosh! Amidst the howling of the wind, Kalangos's right fist punched straight through Duke Negan's body and through his heart. But Duke Negan's figure rapidly turned transparent, just like a soul that was summoned. After the nearly formless figure dissipated, Duke Negan appeared before the French door on the other side of the winding corridor. He wore a scrutinizing smile. Another Beyonder. They prepared ahead of time. To lay an ambush for me? How is that possible? Although Kalangos was unwilling to accept this fact, he dealt with it calmly. The glove on his left hand squirmed and took on the form of dark golden scales. His irises grew pale and became vertical. Then a shapeless wave swept from every direction. Ladies and gentlemen were thrown into a state of uncontrollable fear at the same time. They left their hiding places and ran around aimlessly. The scene became chaotic. The Beyonders didn't dare to act recklessly as they were worried they might hurt their relatives and friends. Seizing the opportunity, Kalangos ran quickly as hurricanes whirled around him. He smashed through one of the resting room doors before smashing through an oriel window. Amidst the shattering sound, he leaped outside and flew a distance away from Duke Negan's mansion with the aid of the wind. The moment he landed, Kalangos immediately ran towards a forest ahead of him. It was a municipal garden, an escape route he had scouted out a while ago. Once he shook off his pursuers, he could change his appearance and blend into the massive population of Backland of more than 5 million people. That was also the reason why he dared to accept such a difficult mission. After a while, there was gale blowing towards Duke Negan's mansion. The Cardinal of the Church of the Lord of Storms, the Archbishop of Backland, Spellsinger of God, Ace Snake brought a few mandated punishers and flew towards the mansion. He couldn't inform the other Beyonders in time. Alger was one of the members that arrived with Archbishop Ace. However, he was in a bad mood because he saw the broken windows and the other Beyonders running out of the mansion. It meant that Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos had escaped. Kalangos lost his pursuers with the help of the wind after crossing a man-made lake. He surveyed his surroundings, intending to create the illusion that he had entered a ditch to escape into the Tussock River before turning to the financial center of Backland, the Hillston Borough. At that moment his field of vision suddenly blurred. He saw the colors around him saturate in the darkness. The green trees became greener, their red fruits even redder. The dark blackness of the water became darker. Everything appeared to be splashed with pastel paint. Under the sky where the crimson moon was obscured, there were many indescribable transparent figures, as well as different lustrous splendors that contained mysterious knowledge. Kalangos found himself coming to a halt as he floated in midair. Beneath his feet, dark water continually rose towards him. Under the water were pale white palms reaching out for him. Not good. Kalangos realized that he had been ambushed. And the ambusher was definitely not weak. A giant humanoid skeleton suddenly appeared before him. The monster was 4 meters tall, and burning in its eye sockets were pitch-black flames. The bones on its body were blurry and illusory. Kalangos gave his enemy an expressionless look as he let out a sneer. At the same time, the glove on his left hand released a radiant light, appearing as if it was cast out of pure gold. Kalangos leaned back and spread his arms wide as though he was trying to hug the sun. A bolt of pure, burning brilliance descended from the sky, enveloping the giant skeleton. The pastel-like world quaked in response, and the pale hands under the dark water evaporated one by one. This was the Beyonder powers of the Priest of Light. It was a Beyonder power from the Sun Sequence pathway. It was the nemesis of the undead. The radiant pillar of light dissipated, and the pitch-black flames of the giant skeleton instantly extinguished. It then turned transparent as it disintegrated in the air. Before Kalangos had the time to use the abilities of the Priest of Light to dispel the pastel-like world, his expression abruptly turned rigid. He saw another giant skeleton appear to his left. It was also 4 meters tall, its eyes burning with a black flame, identical to the monster from before. Immediately following that, the same skeletal monster appeared around Kalangos, one after another. 1, 2, 3. There were more than 100 of them. More than 100 pairs of burning black flames cast their gaze onto their target at the same time. Underneath him, the dark water surface rose higher, almost coming into contact with Kalangos's feet. Pale white hands extended outward, flailing them around constantly as though they were grabbing at a life-saving straw. Spread out and pursue him. Try to corner him, instructed the cardinal, Ace Snake. He conjured a typhoon and took to the air, flying toward the direction where Kalangos had fled. Duke Negan and the rest didn't join the ranks of mandated punishers in consideration of their statuses. Instead, they stood at the windows or balconies to observe. It was also at this moment when the ordinary nobles who were running around frantically slowly calmed down. Due to the darkness and the undulating shouts, they were unsure of what exactly happened. All they knew was that Duke Negan might have encountered an assassin. Alger Wilson clenched his jaw and ran out of Duke Negan's mansion, following the path of the municipal garden into the Hillston borough. He wasn't willing to miss this opportunity, no matter how small the hope was. Suddenly, he heard a voice which was carried to him by the wind. "There's no need to continue the pursuit." No need to continue the pursuit? The voice of Cardinal Snake. Alger stopped after just running a few steps forward. He turned to look into the sky, puzzled. He saw Cardinal Snake, who was wearing a black robe adorned with many storm symbols, floating above the forest and the man-made lake and staring down. Alger creased his brows and sped over to where the cardinal was without considering the reason. As he neared his position, he made use of his seafarer abilities to get a clearer look. The Spellsinger of God showed no expression, but his posture made it evident that he was serious. His exposed white hair that peeked out from under his black hat swayed with the wind, accentuating his stern silver eyes. Alger retracted his gaze and ran out of the forest. The scene of the calm pond reflecting the crimson moonlight suddenly appeared in his eyes. On the pond's surface, a tall figure was floating near the bank. That figure had a unique wide jaw, his brown hair was tied in a ponytail. His dark green eyes were cold yet blank. Kalangos. Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos. Alger was taken aback at first, then he felt both surprise and joy. He couldn't believe his eyes, and even suspected that the darkness was causing him to hallucinate. Before he could react, he suddenly saw Kalangos's face rot rapidly. It oozed a yellow-green liquid, his flesh peeling off piece by piece. Pat, pat, pat. All that was left of Kalangos's face was a skull. His two vacant eyeballs fell from their sockets and onto the ground beside the lake. Kalangos fell apart completely. His clothes draped over his rotting flesh and white bones and blocked the sparkling radiance. In less than 20 seconds, one of the 7 pirate admirals, Kalangos, had died mysteriously in front of Alger's eyes. This shocking scene was etched deeply into Alger's mind. It made him suspect if he was having a terrifying nightmare. What was happening? Didn't Kalangos escape successfully? Why did he die so simply yet so mysteriously here? What did he encounter for him to lose his life in such a short amount of time? He's a Sequence 6 Wind Blessed, the owner of Creeping Hunger. Who did it? What was the motive for killing Kalangos? Just as countless ideas flooded Alger's mind, he heard Spellsinger of God, Ace Snake's charismatic voice. "Did you give the information to anyone else? Is there anyone else who knows of this information?" Alger quickly calmed down. He glanced at Kalangos's remains and gave an explanation that he had prepared. "I reported the information to you the moment I found out about it." He couldn't help but grumble inwardly. If it wasn't for the fact that Ace Snake had gone for a walk along the Tussock River, forcing me to spend time finding him, Kalangos might not have even escaped Duke Negan's mansion. Of course, he didn't dare say this in front of a high-sequence beyonder. He could only respectfully and humbly continue. "The personnel who received the information directly even sacrificed himself for it, and no one opened the letter during its transfer. I can vouch for this. But I cannot confirm if there was a leak at the source of this information. Since we could learn of it, others might have too." As Alger spoke, he formulated some guesses about who killed Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos. The person or organization who tasked Kalangos to assassinate Duke Negan. Since Kalangos had already successfully escaped and there was no threat of any information leaks, there's no need to kill him. If it were me, I would get Kalangos to lay low and try another assassination attempt when everyone was certain that he had left Backland. Also, Kalangos only trusts himself, so he wouldn't tell his assassination plan to anyone. Duke Negan has been organizing gatherings lately in preparation for his bill proposal in September, so there are abundant opportunities. Other than Kalangos himself, there's no one who can correctly predict when he would strike. Unless that person was a prophet. But that is unlikely. Other factions? Not possible. Miss Justice prayed to Mr. Fool to relay the information the moment she noticed a problem. There was no way another organization could have received the information at the same time. Mr. Fool. Alger was shocked as he thought of a possibility. The person who struck was Mr. Fool's adorer. He happened to be in Backland and thus lent a hand. The more he thought about it, the more Alger felt that this guess was close to the truth. Only the members and subordinates of the Tarot Club could have received the information in time. Only the help of the Fool's adorer could make it seem so mysterious and without motive. Just as he was immersed in his thoughts, Cardinal Snake fell silent for a moment. He told the rest of the mandated punishers who were making their way over, Kalangos is dead. A high-sequence Beyonder or someone who used a sealed artifact of a similar level killed him. But this is rather dangerous and highly unlikely. After a preliminary analysis, I believe that the high-sequence Beyonder is of the pathway of death, perhaps a member of the Numinous Episcopate, but not someone I know of. There's also the possibility of it being a member of another secret organization. The motive is unclear. The Numinous Episcopate originated from the southern continent. Legend has it that it was first formed by a descendant of Death in an attempt to revive Death. They were nearly eradicated after the southern continent was colonized, but they stubbornly survived and spread toward the countries of the northern continent. A high-sequence Beyonder. Yes, only a high-sequence Beyonder could kill Kalangos in such a short amount of time. Just a mere adorer of Mr. Fool is already at such a high sequence. That's a demigod. Alger once again looked at the pile of flesh and bone. He felt dissociated from everything as if he had lost all his emotion. He stood there in a daze watching everything. If I happened to betray Mr. Fool one day. He suddenly had such a thought. Immediately, the terrifying scene of Kalangos rapidly rotting appeared in his mind. Alger couldn't help but shiver and lower his head. At the same time he relaxed. Since he couldn't escape or fight back, then he could only choose to be loyal. Phew. With Kalangos dead, no one can threaten me with that secret anymore. He exhaled, his worries completely vanishing. In Duke Negan's mansion, Audrey Hall, who was discussing the assassination with her mother and the other nobles, saw her father appear at the door. She found an excuse and left the resting room for the balcony at the main hall. Father, is something wrong? Audrey looked at Count Hall with her green eyes. Her green eyes had come from her mother, not her father. Count Hall smiled. It's been resolved, my child. You need not worry any longer. Did you tell anyone that Baron Grammer was an impostor? No, Audrey shook her head firmly. I only told an almost godlike existence. She added in her heart. She thought for a moment, then explained herself. After I told you, I went to the bathroom, then to where Mother was. You can ask her. I see. Count Hall nodded and didn't say anything else before mentioning. Kalangos is dead. Someone killed him. Who? Audrey was as shocked as she was excited. No idea. We can't even figure out why the murderer killed Kalangos. It's truly incomprehensible. Count Hall paused. Perhaps it's a person or an organization, a secret and powerful organization. Unclear motive. A secret, powerful organization. Could it be Mr. Fool's adorer? It could be our tarot club. Audrey suddenly had an epiphany. Audrey analyzed many things at once as her mind whirled. Mr. Hanged Man said that Kalangos was a lone wolf who doesn't trust anyone. Only he would know of his own plan. Other than my early discovery of him, there shouldn't have been anyone else who knew he would attempt the assassination tonight. I only told Father and Mr. Fool that I suspected that Kalangos was disguised as Baron Grammer. Although there's a telegram cable in Duke Negan's mansion and he would have been able to send out information in time to ask for help, there's no reason to hide that. Dad's puzzlement implies that the powerful being that killed Kalangos wasn't within their expectations. Combining all of the above, I can almost be certain that the person who killed Kalangos was Mr. Fool's adorer. Plus, only the unique model of the Tarot Club can create such a strange situation with unclear motives. Kalangos was a Sequence 6 Wind Blessed and he had the magical item, the Creeping Hunger. To be able to quickly kill him without leaving any traces behind, it could only be a high sequence beyonder known also as demigods, right? Or maybe he used a sealed artifact which possesses immense danger. Regardless of the possibility, it shows that Mr. Fool's adorer is extremely powerful. Mr. Fool lives up to his reputation. Regardless, I certainly provided clues, so Mr. Hanged Man has to carry out his promise and pass me the pituitary gland of a rainbow salamander. This should be our Tarot Club's very first mission, right? One of the 7 pirate admirals, Kalangos, died because of us. Looking at his daughter who seemed excited, Count Hall, who was a handsome man in his youth, coughed lightly and warned his daughter with a mask of solemnity. Audrey, I know that you're very interested in mysticism and I normally tolerate it. But you mustn't be involved in this. You can't even ask about it. You will be introduced by the Queen to the Backland social scene events by the end of this year. As an adult, you should clearly know and remember that a terrifying beyonder or a powerful hidden organization is equivalent to danger. Do you understand that? Yes, Father, Audrey replied charmingly. I was just a little curious. Curiosity won't do either. Count Hall emphasized, and he couldn't help but let out a helpless smile. Okay. Audrey nodded obediently. I understand the whole incident better than you do anyway. She made a silly face in her head. Count Hall thought and said with a gentle smile, regardless, you are the heroine tonight, the savior of Duke Negan. Half of the reason why Kalangos is dead is partially because of you, and it's the same with the bounty. Of course, if there's no one that admits to killing Kalangos and comes to receive the bounty, the remaining half of it will be yours too. Added together it will be £10,000 in total. The bounties set up by the Intis Republic, the Fasak Empire and other countries and organizations could be received as well. After conversion there should be about £20,000 in total. Duke Negan promised that he would give you his holiday estate at Desi Bay as a gift. It includes a huge rubber tree plantation. I don't know the annual profit exactly, but it definitely won't be low. He spent £8,000 to buy it back then and later, even built a house and purchased good quality seeds for planting. Audrey, who already had an inheritance of £300,000, was considered rich. However, a reward that was almost £40,000 was still a huge amount of income. Many noble ladies wouldn't even receive such a figure as a dowry. In an allied marriage of a noble and a businessman in August, Miss Mary Oldbury, the daughter of a millionaire, only had an £80,000 dowry. I never considered the bounty. Audrey muttered inwardly. Suddenly she thought of something. If she were to receive the bounty and her name spread, the Hanged Man could easily find out who Justice was. This can't happen. As a member of the Tarot Club, I have to maintain a sense of mystery. Audrey looked towards her dad and reorganized her words. Dad, I'm a little worried. Why? What happened? Count Hall asked in concern. If it were to spread that I found out that Kalangos was disguised as Baron Grammer, I'm afraid that his underlings would take revenge on me. I'm afraid that whoever instructed Kalangos to assassinate Duke Negan would target me. Audrey tried to make herself seem pitiful, weak, and helpless. I'll hire someone to protect you, Count Hall replied. Then he nodded faintly and said, there's really no need for you to take such a risk. Plus, the person that killed Kalangos took the creeping hunger. Of course, to a high-sequence beyonder, that wouldn't be a strong enough motive for interfering. Yes, I'll inform Duke Negan to keep this a secret and tell someone else to receive the bounty on your behalf and compensate you in private. Then Count Hall smiled and said, "You really are my daughter. You earned £40,000 so easily. This is more than 1/10 of your current wealth." The £300,000 was what he had set aside for her in advance. He would still add in another part when she got married as his daughter's inheritance. "Am I as good as you were?" Audrey happily asked in reply. Count Hall shook his head and laughed. "Much better than I was. The profit from my very first business venture was only £60. Audrey suddenly became extremely thrilled. The satisfaction derived from receiving a £40,000 bounty, getting her father's compliment, causing Kalangos's death, completing an extraordinary task, and the reward of a rainbow salamander's pituitary gland that she was going to get from the hanged man amplified her happiness. "I really want to report this to Mr. Fool to get his reassurance." "Oh, no way. A powerful, mysterious being killed Kalangos with an unknown motive. There might be someone observing me in secret looking for clues regarding Kalangos's death. I can't show any hint of abnormality. Pooey. There's nothing abnormal about me to begin with. As long as I don't attempt to recite Mr. Fool's honorary name. If Mr. Fool's adorer was really the murderer, he must have already known the outcome. He wouldn't need me to report it to him. Well, do I need to share the bounty with the adorer? No matter what kind of payment method is used to transfer £20,000, it would definitely draw attention. I can't take the risk. Plus, it has always been the hanged man who's been asking for help from Mr. Fool. Technically he should pay the reward. Yes, after all, he declared that he had many pages of Emperor Roselle's diary. I'll try to gather more pages of the diary to thank Mr. Fool for answering my prayers. He definitely wouldn't be interested in crass money." Audrey quickly determined her next course of action. In Duke Negan's mansion in a secret study room, the fat and tall Duke sat on a high-back chair behind a desk. He was smoking a cigar as he looked at the Spellsinger of God, Ace Snake, Prime Minister Iron Negan, and the others opposite him. "Based on our current knowledge, we still aren't certain of the identity of the high-sequence beyonder that killed Kalangos." Prime Minister Aguisid Negan had just rushed over from the king's side. Archbishop Snake nodded. "We've determined that it wasn't any of the high-sequence beyonders that we're familiar with or the numinous episcopate either. We have sufficient reason to believe that it's a powerful, mysterious beyonder we aren't aware of. Of course, we haven't eliminated the possibility that the person was using a dangerous sealed artifact." Duke Negan held his cigar and said, "Maybe it wasn't just a high-sequence beyonder. There might be a hidden organization behind that person, a hidden organization that we don't know enough about. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to lay in ambush for Kalangos so accurately. Yes, perhaps one of the guests at tonight's ball is a member of theirs." His brother, Prime Minister Aguisid, stated solemnly, "Regardless of that possibility, we have to be careful. We have to quickly find out the identity of the high-sequence beyonder, the purpose of his presence in Backlund, and why he killed Kalangos. A high-sequence beyonder that they didn't know about who wandering in Backlund was sufficient to draw attention from the government and 3 major churches. Although a Sequence 4 or Sequence 3 beyonder might not be able to withstand the cannon attacks of their warships, there was no need for them to experience a frontal assault. They possessed too much of a mysterious power. Hence they were existences even more dangerous than ironclad warships. Hence the reason why they were called demigods." Spellsinger of God, Ace Snake stood up and said, "Let me make some arrangements and get into contact with the Church of the Evernight Goddess, the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery Hive Mind. His Majesty will allow the military and the intelligence agencies to cooperate," Prime Minister Aguisid promised. In a hotel in the North Borough of Backlund, Azek sat under a gas lamp and looked at the glove before him. The glove was very thin, as though it was made from human skin. It seemed that as long as it was filled with flesh and blood, it would turn into a hand. Azek looked at it for a very long time. his face suddenly contorted in agony and pain as he muttered, "I seem to have cooperated with them before." Klein didn't sleep well the entire night because he didn't receive any reports from Justice or the hanged man, nor did he receive any reply from Mr. Azek. He kept thinking about the outcome of the incident with Kalangos. It must have been quite a scene if Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man didn't dare to contact me recklessly. But why didn't Mr. Azek reply to my letter? Did he not get involved, or was there an accident? Did Kalangos hurt him? Klein extended his hand and covered his mouth as he yawned. He got onto the trackless carriage that headed for Zitland Street. Extra. Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos killed in Backlund. Extra. Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos killed in Backlund. Just as the carriage was about to set off, Klein suddenly heard the paperboy, which was also one of the Emperor Rosel's inventions. Klein was momentarily stunned as he quickly fished out a penny and bought the Tianjin Morning Post. Many passengers made the same choice. He opened the newspaper and quickly read the headline. Pirate Kalangos shot dead by Duke's bodyguard in Backlund. Kalangos died? Mr. Azek did it? Klein fell into deep thought and lampooned himself as the boss behind the scenes. I actually had to find out the outcome from the newspapers. The article covering what happened to Kalangos wasn't long, and all it stated was the time, place, people involved, and the outcome. As the saying goes, the more succinct the content, the more serious the situation. Something that happened in Backlund at 8 or 9 last night is already being reported in Tianjin City this morning. The spread of information in this world isn't too slow due to the exceptional contributions of Emperor Rosel. It must have been one of the nobles or ministers who attended the ball who leaked this information to some reporter. Then that reporter used the telegraph to send this sensational news to the news companies in various counties. The morning papers are usually drafted at night and printed after midnight before being distributed in the morning. There was just enough time to make changes and publish this article. Just based on this news, the Tianjin Morning Post would be able to sell an extra 1,000 copies. And that's only considering just this city. Klein's thoughts became more and more distracted before finally calming down. Since Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos is dead, that means that even if Mr. Azek is injured, it wouldn't be too serious. If it was serious, he definitely would have been captured by the mandated punishers or Duke Negan's Beyonder bodyguards that were in pursuit of Kalangos. And when facing such a situation, Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man would definitely try their best to report it to me. The latter not happening is enough to indicate that everything is under control. Yes, if Mr. Azek doesn't give me a reply, or if Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man do not pray to me by tonight, I'll blow the copper whistle once again to summon the messenger and send over a letter of inquiry. Relaxing, Klein shifted his attention away from the newspaper, then he surveyed the public carriage. Most of the people who could afford transport like this could read, and under the influence of the term extra, many had bought the Tianjin Morning Post. Now a few of them were quietly discussing the incident. The King of Pirates and the admirals have been terrorizing the sea routes for a long time. They back off when they see the battleships of the various countries, but they don't pay much regard to merchant ships. Even though Kalangos had only been inducted as one of the 7 pirate admirals for less than a decade, he's the first to be killed by the government. Frankly, I'm curious as to what he was doing in Backlund. When a pirate leaves the ocean, death is a foreseeable outcome. Let's hope that there will be a more detailed report in the future. Holy Lord of Storms, I wish to know which of Duke Negan's bodyguards killed Kalangos. His bounty was a full £10,000. £10,000. If I had £10,000, I would immediately quit my job and buy 2 or 3 medium-sized nurseries. I would invest in the shares of some colonizing companies and railroad companies, and receive a stable dividend every year. That's only the bounty of this kingdom. Intis, Fasak, Fainapotter, and some merchant organizations also have bounties for Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos. I sure hope that there's a newspaper that will give a full list of the bounties. £10,000? Klein was shocked to hear that. With his already impressive pay, he would have to take 20 years to be able to save up that much money even without eating or drinking. Only, forget it, there's nothing I can do either. It would be impossible for me to claim the bounty. He folded the newspaper a little dejectedly and looked out the window of the carriage. At this point he finally concluded that the incident with Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos had come to a close. All that was left was to tie up the loose ends, such as the batch of Roselle's diary that the hanged man had promised him. Backlund, Cherwood Borough. Furs Wall and Zio Dericha were walking along the street towards the nearest branch of the Varvat Bank. My money seems to disappear without me noticing. Furs sighed. Zio felt the same way. That's right. Luckily my book Stormwind Mountain Villa is rather popular and there are still royalties being sent to my account. Otherwise I'd have to find a clinic or a hospital and become a doctor once again. Furs let out a sigh, both in satisfaction and in worry. Zio was silent for a moment before carefully asking, "Will the investigation of Kalangos affect your status as an author? After all, we could be under the attention of the mandated punishers, Nighthawks and the rest." "No, the only one they would focus on is you." Furs laughed. "You were the one who sent someone to make a police report. Same for the one who sent the letter and the one famous among the alleys and gangs of the East Borough. As for me, Furs Wall, I'm still the popular best-selling author." Zio said in a daze. "So you've just been accompanying me all this time?" Furs stroked her hair and laughed. "Don't you find that this was an interesting experience? This experience has provided me with the much-needed inspiration for my work. My next novel will be about a sudden brutal murder." Zio paused, not knowing how to continue the conversation. All she could do was continue walking forward bitterly, forgetting to make a turn until Furs dragged her back. At that moment they heard a paperboy shout, "Extra! Extra! Rear Admiral Hurricane Kalangos killed in Backlund." What? Zio and Furs looked at each other in confusion. They only came to their senses after the paperboy repeated himself multiple times. "What? Kalangos is dead." Furs couldn't believe what she was hearing. "He's dead. How did he die so suddenly?" Zio, who was trying to hide from the prosecution of this merciless pirate, was shocked and dazed. Doesn't this have to follow a normal procedure? First they find clues to confirm Kalangos's motive, then they would gather powerful Beyonders and ambush him. Killing the pirate was the last step. But Kalangos was killed even though the first step hadn't been completed yet. He died just like that. Furs and Zio exchanged looks as if they were two marble statues. Nearly a minute later, Zio charged towards the paperboy and bought a copy of the Tussock Times. This was one of the 3 most distributed newspapers in the Lone Kingdom. "Oh. Kalangos is really dead, killed by Duke Negan's bodyguard." "Oh goddess, Negan's bodyguard is..." Zio gasped, leaving out a powerful Beyonder that she had wanted to say. Furs looked at her good friend in pity. "To think that you would believe everything the newspapers say." "All right, perhaps someone realized Kalangos's motive in advance, and the mandated punishers, Nighthawks, Machinery Hive Mind, and the military cooperated and executed a successful ambush." Zio froze and exhaled. "We don't need to worry about it any longer. We can go back to our normal lives, but we have to avoid the sphere of influence of that police station from before." She looked at Furs and asked, a little worried, "How much do you think Miss Audrey will pay us now? I know that a few £100 wouldn't be too much to her, but we haven't really completed what she asked of us." "No, at least we made Kalangos appear on his own accord. The reason he rushed to take action and fall for the ambush was definitely in some part due to our contributions," Furs consoled her. "With Miss Audrey's generosity, she'll give us half the reward even if she's not giving us all of it." "Let's hope so." Zio took in a deep breath and had an expectant gaze. "I wonder who will claim that bounty of £10,000. It sure invites the envy of others. If I had that much money, I'd have become a sequence 7 or 6 long ago, but I missed the opportunity time and time again." Furs also felt a little sorry, but she reminded her friend, Sayo, let us not contact Miss Audrey for the time being. Let her contact us on her own accord. There are too many hidden details surrounding the death of Kalangos. Looking for Miss Audrey abruptly could put us in a dangerous situation. Sayo first nodded before saying in surprise, how did you know that I was thinking of heading to Empress Borough? Try guessing. Furs laughed in response. After a busy morning, Klein returned to the Blackthorn Security Company. He reported to Dunsmith, Captain, the people connected to Lenevis that I'm in charge of investigating have no problems. They were merely victims, not associated with any Beyonder incidents. Dunn placed both his elbows on his desk. Then stop that for the time being. We shall place our focus on the more likely suspects after the rest of the members have finished with their investigations. We cannot direct all our manpower onto this incident. We have to guard against other sudden incidents. All right. Klein was about to stand up and head to lunch when he suddenly heard knocking on the door. Please enter, Dunn said in his mellow voice. The handle moved and Rosen peeked inside. Captain, someone is here with a mission. Mission? This seems to be targeted at the Blackthorn Security Company and not the Nighthawks squad. So who mistakenly came to us this time? Klein wondered to himself. Dunn thought for a moment before saying, we can go hear the request out and reject it if it's too troublesome. He arranged his shirt and vest as he walked out of the office. He made his way through the partition and towards the sofa in the receptionist area. Klein and Rosen followed curiously behind. There were two ladies on the sofa. Both of them were wearing black hats and dresses without any extra color. One of the ladies was plump and had fair skin. Her face was completely obscured by the black veil of her hat. Klein felt a sense of familiarity when he saw her, as though he had seen her somewhere before. Just as he was recalling, he heard the skinnier lady beside her speak. The mission we would like to entrust to you is for you to track and monitor Madame Sharon and find evidence of her crimes. Madame Sharon. Klein suddenly had an epiphany and recalled where the sense of familiarity came from. The lady that remained silent was the wife of Member of Parliament Maynard, the daughter of the new party's leader. She finds it hard to accept the death of her husband and is unwilling to accept the conclusion the police department came to, so she came to a security company in private to do another investigation? To think that she came directly to us. Klein shook his head and laughed to himself. Madame Sharon? Dunn obviously knew of Baron Coe's widow, a famous socialite in Tingen. Maynard's wife turned her head to shoot a glance at the scrawny lady who came with her to the Blackthorn Security Company, but she didn't speak for herself. The scrawny lady in the black dress and hat weighed her words before she spoke. Yes, Madame Sharon, the wife of the deceased Baron Coe. She stammered, then suddenly spat in anger. She's a B***T. Upon hearing her curse, Klein suddenly recalled the porno that he had seen and Madame Sharon's behavior, which appeared nervous on the surface but was calm deep down. That made him believe the rumors about her, and he felt sorry for the deceased old baron. It's not like Madame Sharon can't remarry. But her loose behavior really makes the old baron's grave a perfect nesting ground for cuckoos. Dunn didn't have much of a change in his facial expression. He sat on the sofa opposite and said with his mellow voice, but that doesn't make her a criminal. You know clearly, and I know it clearly too. Madame Sharon is very influential in Tingen. If we were to follow her and monitor her, there could be very serious consequences for us. She's a criminal, the scrawny lady said angrily. She caused my brother's death. But those lovers of hers pressured the police department and made them pronounce that my brother died of excessive drinking and continuous indulgence in sexual pleasure. They are all criminals. Those. Klein realized that the scrawny lady was Maynard's sister while feeling sorry for the old baron once again. That's right, for such a scandal she would definitely not send a maidservant here. It's better if the request is made by family. He nodded his head in enlightenment. Mrs. Maynard patted the back of the scrawny woman's hand and added with a deep yet cold voice, she's a criminal. If you suffer any damages because of this, I will compensate you for your losses. That she lives up to her identity as the daughter of the new party's head. If the police department wasn't very confident with the result of my mediumship ritual, I'm afraid they would have submitted under her pressure. Klein lampooned inwardly. Dunn was silent for nearly 20 seconds before he said, "All right. I have another question. Why do you seem to be so certain that we would find something?" The scrawny lady nodded and said, "The tobacco merchant Viceroy introduced us here. He said that you're the cream of the crop in this industry and can complete missions that others aren't capable of completing." The tobacco merchant Viceroy. Who's he? Klein looked at Captain subconsciously and noticed that Dunn Smith looked really confused. I'm so silly, why did I hope for Captain to remember something like this? After all, even I don't quite remember. He sighed. The scrawny lady saw that the two elite mercenaries looked confused, so she added, "You saved his kidnapped son." "Oh, him. That kidnap case led me to the discovery of the Antigonus family's notebook." Klein was suddenly enlightened. Dunn nodded slightly and said, "I understand." Upon seeing this, the scrawny woman laid out her offer. You are to tail and monitored at B** for 2 weeks. Even if you don't find any evidence of her crime, you have to take note of who visited her and who she visited. We will pay £50 for this. And if you find evidence of her crimes, we would pay another additional £200. That's a large sum of money. When Klein suddenly recalled that he had only spent £7 to hire Detective Henry to gather so much information about red chimney houses, he became a little ashamed. Dunn thought for a moment before saying, "No problem, we can sign the contract now. You'll have to pay a deposit of £20 up front. Captain, we're really lacking in manpower right now. There's the huge case regarding Lenevis." Klein didn't expect Dunn Smith to accept the mission, although he himself was quite keen on accepting it. Mrs. Maynard nodded slightly and said, "No problem. I believe in you. Please don't disappoint me." Dunn smiled but kept quiet. He turned his head and told Rose, "Please write up a contract." When the contract was signed and the deposit was paid, Dunn watched Mrs. Maynard and the scrawny lady leave the Blackthorn Security Company. He then looked sideways at Klein and said, "This mission will be yours." Huh? Klein looked confused. Dunn smiled and said, "Didn't you want to learn tailing techniques and monitoring skills? This is a great opportunity. It also turns out that you're done with your part in the Lenevis case." All right. Klein didn't reject the assignment. Just as he accepted, his mind began whirling quickly. According to the rules, half of the mission's commission is handed to Mrs. Oriana as additional funding for the team. The remaining would be split among the involved members. However, it seems like I'm the only one handling the case. Regardless of whether the investigation succeeds, there will be at least £25 of income. On top of that, I'll receive my usual weekly pay. If I really could find some clues, I could even receive £125. Captain is a wise man. Dunn stole a glance at him and said, "Learn the tailing techniques and monitoring skills from Leonard and Fry in the morning, and put your combat training on hold for this week." "Yes. I think you're quite well trained already, so I'll send someone to inform Gawain." Learn tailing techniques and monitoring skills from Leonard and Fry? That doesn't seem very reliable. Klein was stunned. He could imagine Leonard using only one method, which was playing his Potter lute while singing melodious poetry. Then he would probably seduce Madame Sharon to bed in order to monitor her up close. As for Fry, he had a unique air to him. He was cold and gloomy, so no matter where he went he would catch the attention of others. How could such people make good spies? As his thoughts churned, Klein replied seriously, "All right." Dunn nodded slightly and walked towards the partition. Suddenly he paused, turned around and hesitated before he spoke. "Do you remember the tobacco merchant? What was the kidnapping about?" "So you didn't remember anything or understood anything? Why were you acting so staid and confident?" Klein facepalmed. Based on Leonard's guidance, Klein wasn't in a hurry to tail Madame Sharon. even though he knew that she stayed on Osna Street in the East Borough. Until you know the target's routine, you can't tail your target recklessly. Plus, monitoring alone makes it difficult to take note of everything. Unless you don't eat, drink, sleep and go home, Leonard had said. Hence, Klein followed his suggestion and found one of the triad bosses in the Hound pub and spent £5 to get his underlings to monitor Madame Sharon and record her daily routine. Luckily, this can be reimbursed. Why does it feel like I'm subcontracting? On Friday afternoon, Klein received the investigation report from the triad boss. Calling it an investigation report was an obvious insult to professional detectives. Not one of the triad boss's underlings was literate. They relied on drawings and symbols, which was then interpreted and organized by their semi-literate boss who had attended Sunday school for a year. Klein got a headache just from reading it and took quite a while to finish reading the report. According to the surveillance, Madame Sharon seldom leaves her place recently. There aren't many guests who visit either. She might be affected by Maynard's death. Those triad underlings are quite capable. They even gathered information from Madame Sharon's maidservant. She will be attending the Conservative Party's banquet tonight. She might return home quite late or maybe not return. This is an opportunity for me to put theory into practice. Klein quickly decided to sneak into Madame Sharon's house and search through it. With his duties regarding the Lenevis case over, the temporary suspension of combat training, and the end of the Kalangos incident, Klein only had two matters on hand. One was to investigate the Red Chimney houses, and the second was following and monitoring Madame Sharon. In other words, he was relatively free. 2 days ago he had received Mr. Azek's reply. There was only one sentence on the letter. I obtained the creeping hunger and recalled something. Klein had finally confirmed that it was Mr. Azek who killed Kalangos and that this amnesiac teacher of his who had a long life was a high-sequence beyonder. However, he didn't dare ask him what he had recalled with the aid of the creeping hunger. Azek obviously didn't want to talk about it. If he was willing to share, he would have described it directly in the letter. In Klein's reply, he only reminded Mr. Azek that the creeping hunger yearned for the flesh, blood, and soul of living humans. He had to find a safe sealing method. In addition, Justice and the Hanged Man had yet to pray to him, but Klein wasn't worried. He understood that both members were afraid of being monitored, so they didn't recite his name recklessly. Gas street lamps illuminated the straight Osna Street at night while the crimson moon hung high above. Klein, who had sneaked out with the clown's balance and agility, leaped over the outer wall of Madame Sharon's house quietly. Passing through the garden, he arrived by the side of the house. He climbed up the water pipe and slipped onto the balcony on the second floor. Klein had never even climbed a tree successfully when he was young, so it was quite a monumental event. He took out a tarot card from the pocket of his black windbreaker, slotted it into the gap of the balcony door, lifted it lightly and unlocked the door. The servants are so careless. They didn't use an additional lock. Otherwise, I'd have to try entering by climbing through the window. Klein muttered silently and entered the house. Based on the information provided by the triad boss, he found Madame Sharon's bedroom easily. He turned the knob and stepped into the room. He closed the door carefully and suddenly smelled a faint fragrance. It reminded him of the fragrance of a woman that caused the blood vessels of other people to swell. Klein felt a little faint and he even felt his body reacting. He immediately calmed down with cogitation and made a self-deprecating comment. She's using an aphrodisiac as perfume? A few seconds later, Klein activated his spirit vision and surveyed the room, only to find how extravagantly decorated Madame Sharon's room was. In a spacious area with a cloakroom that was ajar, there was a thick carpet, a blanket made with goose feathers, a makeup table strewn with skincare products and cosmetics, a dazzling array of jewelry, thin clothing and socks thrown over the rocking chair, and multiple decorative items adorned with gold silk. All of these entered Klein's field of vision. What attracted Klein's attention the most was an unfinished oil painting. On the painting was the naked figure of Madame Sharon herself, her brown hair like a waterfall, her eyes like an innocent deer's, pure and limpid. But her curved eyebrows, sharp nose, and tender lips accentuated her form as a mature female. The two qualities fused together despite the contradiction, releasing an alarming temptation. Klein only gave a cursory glance at the area under the neck for a moment. He wasn't trying to be gentlemanly. After all, he had already seen the porno, so why would he have scruples over a picture? His attention had been grabbed by the pastels, palettes, and paintbrushes beside the painting, as well as a full-length silver-coated mirror. This combination and their placement relative to each other gave Klein a weird thought that the painter was Madame Sharon herself, and not some artist she had seduced. A beautiful woman with a great figure, flirtatious yet innocent, stripping and drawing herself while looking in the mirror to chronicle her beauty. Feels a little odd. Is Madame Sharon narcissistic? Klein gulped silently and retracted his gaze. He started to search for possible evidence of her crimes. Following Leonard's and Fry's instructions, he kept his black gloves on as he searched. He had to keep the original position of everything in his memory to facilitate putting everything back after he was done. This proved easy for an advanced seer. If he forgot, he could use dream divination to recall the placement easily. Of course, he had performed a divination before he left the house tonight. There was going to be no danger and he would be met with relative success. That's something a good charlatan would do. Even if I'm already a clown. Klein lampooned himself. He spent 20 minutes searching Madame Sharon's room, but he didn't find anything noteworthy, nor did he see any light emitted by spirituality. Finally, he stopped before a safe in the corner of the room. The steel safe was a meter tall, thick and heavy. It gave the impression that it was unusually sturdy, as if it could only be opened using explosives. This sure is a characteristic of the age of steam. There must be complicated machinery within the safe. Klein tried to open the safe but failed miserably. He left the safe for last. He took off his left glove and unwound the topaz dangling on his left wrist. Grabbing the silver chain and allowing the pendulum to fall, Klein dispelled the excitement that the fragrance in the room gave him and entered a state of cogitation. His eyes turned dark as he chanted to himself, "There is a secret room or hidden partition in this room. There is a secret room or hidden partition in this room." After reciting it 7 times, Klein's eyes regained their normal color. He looked at the dangling topaz, which was turning counterclockwise. It was a negative result. Klein nodded slightly and left Madame Sharon's room. According to the process from before, he went through the study, the living room, the greenhouse, and other parts of the house, but he didn't find any clues of value. He didn't use dowsing rod seeking since he didn't exactly know what he was looking for. Klein took out his silver pocket watch and gave it a look. He confirmed the time before returning to Madame Sharon's bedroom. Carefully closing the wooden door, Klein took out the silver dagger used for rituals and released his spirituality, allowing it to fuse with the powers of nature and seal the room. He was going to summon himself. He was going to go through the safe using his spirit and check the things inside. "Grandpa doesn't need to know how to lockpick," Klein proclaimed in Mandarin. The process was simple since he was praying to himself. He didn't have to be too particular. Klein took out a candle infused with sandalwood and ignited it using his spirituality. That was going to be his altar. I summon in my name, the fool that doesn't belong to this era, the mysterious ruler above the gray fog, the king of yellow and black who wields good luck." The incantation reverberated around Madame Sharon's bedroom. Klein's spirituality poured out from within him, gently fusing with the candle flame to become a gray, palm-sized veil of light. He then took 4 steps counterclockwise, made his way through the mad ravings and into the world above the gray fog. He saw the door of summoning appear behind the seat of honor at the ancient long table. Klein was about to react when he froze. "I should perform a divination to see if I can discover any clues since I'm already here. Here, as well as removing any interference, my powers are also significantly boosted. Also, because of where I am now, performing a divination is akin to using an object Madame Sharon brings around with her every day. He sat down and conjured a fountain pen and goatskin. What should I divine? Klein slipped into deep thought. Is there anything wrong with Madame Sharon? No, everyone makes mistakes. There would be something wrong with anyone. Is Madame Sharon involved in a crime? No, that's not narrow enough either. As a famous socialite tied to the political sphere, it's natural that she would be associated with something dirty yet cannot be convicted for. Also, what is the definition of a crime anyway? The laws of the Lone Kingdom or the laws of the Intis Republic, or is it up to me to decide? Despite his many thoughts, Klein didn't want to delay it any further. After all, his physical body was still in the real world. Thus, he decided to confirm the past few divinations he did regarding the incident. He picked up the pen and, without writing, he conjured a divination statement on the goatskin before him. John Maynard's death was due to supernatural influences. This was the divination he did when he went to Maynard's house to help the police. The answer he received last time was negative. Grabbing the silver chain, he allowed the topaz pendulum to almost touch the statement on the goatskin. Klein half closed his eyes and silently recited the divination statement. John Maynard's death was due to supernatural influences. John Maynard's death was due to supernatural influences. After repeating it 7 times, he opened his eyes and looked at the pendulum. His pupils constricted suddenly. The topaz pendulum was spinning clockwise. Clockwise meant a positive result. Maynard's death was really due to supernatural influences. Klein stared at the pendulum that was slowing down, his heart churning in turmoil. My divination back then was influenced, disrupted. Madame Sharon is a beyonder, a rather powerful beyonder? Or is there someone backing her, having helped in planning Maynard's death? Did they want to remove a powerful opponent to the seat of mayor, to remove a future House of Commons member of Parliament from the new party? Many thoughts raced through his mind as Klein wrote a new divination statement. Madame Sharon is a beyonder. He recited the statement 7 times, still using the pendulum technique. Klein used the location he was at, as well as the information he knew regarding Madame Sharon, to complete the divination. He saw an answer. The answer was the clockwise rotation of the topaz pendulum. The answer was yes. Madame Sharon is a beyonder. Klein's nerves tensed. He didn't delay any further, immediately answering his own prayer and pushing open the mysterious door. After a moment of chaos and dizziness, he saw Madame Sharon's bedroom and himself. Klein floated to the front of the heavy safe and extended his right hand. He carefully extended his hand into the safe. Since Madame Sharon was a beyonder, he had to be wary of traps in the safe. In such a state where his soul was infused with powers of the mysterious space and his spirituality, Klein no longer needed divination. He would receive a warning when he was approaching something dangerous. A large portion of divination was obtaining revelations by allowing one's astral projection to roam in the spirit world. In other words, it was derived from one's spirituality. Klein didn't notice anything unusual when his nearly transparent hand made it through the thick metal door. After sweeping his hand, he leaned forward, plunging his entire spirit into the safe. He saw that the inside of the safe was split into 3 sections. The first was filled with gold bars, thick stacks of cash, and even more precious jewelry. Another layer had sealed documents. Klein blew on them, but he didn't manage to flip them open to look at their contents. Yes, I'll have to try again with Mr. Azek's copper whistle. Klein had experimented with it previously, when he enveloped the flaring sun charm or Azek's copper whistle with his spirit. Both the items were able to make it through obstacles, as if becoming illusory items themselves. The bottommost layer of the safe was rather strange. There was only a black and white photo there. On the photo was a suave young man. Madame Sharon's past lover? Were they forcefully broken apart, and Madame Sharon having no choice but to marry the old baron and thus embarked on her path of debauchery by entering the beds of multiple men? But deep in her heart she still harbors a pure space. Every night when it's quiet she takes out this photo and strokes it with tears on her face. Klein instantly imagined the plot of a great romantic tragedy. But the more he looked at it, the more something seemed amiss. The young man in the photo seemed perhaps a little too much like Madame Sharon. Madame Sharon's brother? She's a Beyonder. F***K, could she also be of the Demoness pathway? The same as instigator Trissy. Klein suddenly had a stroke of inspiration which scared himself. Could the reason Trissy stayed in Tingen this long be because her partner was here? Klein observed the photo closely, realizing that the young man looked remarkably like Madame Sharon. His nearly transparent face grimaced in pain. He could no longer view that porno the same way as before. Collecting himself, Klein felt for the corners of the safe to see if they hid anything. Even though he couldn't pick up any papers in his current state, passing through objects was a different feeling from passing through the air. The feeling was also different when passing through objects of different densities. In his search, Klein suddenly froze. He found an empty space on the side of the safe facing the wall, a hidden compartment. After confirming that there was no danger, Klein made his way inside. What entered his field of vision were ointments, fragrances, powdered herbs, and other objects. The centerpiece was a statue of a god that took the form of a skeleton. The statue was about the size of a palm and probably of a beautiful girl. It had long hair all the way to its heels. Each strand of hair was thick and clear like a venomous snake. Situated at the tip of every strand of hair was an eye, some closed, others open. Klein was shocked. He caught a whiff of an evil scent and hurried out of the hidden compartment. He now understood why his divination for any secret rooms or partitions in the room had failed. Klein rushed out of the heavy safe in retreat. Only when he realized that everything seemed fine did he calm down. That white bone statue is creepy. Although it isn't dangerous, it gives me the creeps. Could it be the so-called primordial Demoness? An evil god like the hidden sage, the dark side of the universe, or the true creator? Klein recalled his hunches about Madame Sharon, and he suddenly understood what existence the white bone statue might represent. Just as he thought, his spirituality stirred as an ominous premonition gripped him. Klein quickly flew next to the window with complicated patterns and looked at the road outside. He saw a carriage driving towards the front gate under the light of the gas street lamps. Madame Sharon is back? There was a tug at his heartstrings as he finally understood the source of his ominous premonition. Taking into consideration that Trissy only became a woman after Sequence 8 instigator, Madame Sharon was most likely a Sequence 7. And since Madame Sharon has been active in Tingen's social circles for many years, she was most likely much stronger than Trissy. Klein didn't dare to take the risk of relying on his flaring sun charm and Azek's copper whistle. Instead, he made the wise decision to leave. He had a limited number of charms. Plus, he didn't know when he would be able to get the sealed artifact, mutated sun's sacred emblem, out again. Hence, if it wasn't a desperate situation, Klein didn't want to waste his most powerful charms. He would also have the issue of explaining himself if he were to use it. I can't just tell Dunn that a kind expert had happened to pass by and helped me, right? As for why he didn't want to use Azek's copper whistle, it was because Klein wasn't sure if the messenger that was summoned had the ability to fight. What if it just looked strong but only knew how to send letters? With what I discovered earlier, it should be sufficient for the Nighthawk squad to take action. Why should I fight against Madame Sharon alone? We can totally gank her. Klein emphasized inwardly and ended his summoning. With a whoosh, he returned to the world above the gray fog. He then quickly wrapped himself in spirituality and stimulated a rapid descent to return to his body in reality. He quickly put out the flame and put away the candle. He removed the wall of spirituality and left Madame Sharon's bedroom. He took the same path back, but he didn't have the time to reset the bolt on the balcony door. Sliding down the water pipe, Klein climbed over the wall which was opposite the entrance of the house. He remained hidden until he reached the neighboring street. Then he hired the expensive night carriage to Zutland Street. Madame Sharon, who looked beautiful in her black dress, slowly walked to the second floor. She dismissed her maidservants and opened the door to her bedroom. Her pure clear eyes suddenly concentrated and reflected fine threads that were almost transparent and unnoticeable. They didn't possess the luster of spirituality. They were like human hair that was pathologically changed. If one didn't already know of their existence or have a pair of very special eyes, they wouldn't notice the strands. All those fine threads had torn and fallen to the ground. Madame Sharon squinted her eyes and directed her focus onto the thick gray metal safe. 36 Sitland Street, the Blackthorn Security Company. Dunn was reading the newspaper casually with his legs crossed. He looked at Klein, who appeared before his office door with a strange expression. He sighed and said, "Weren't you supposed to slip into Madame Sharon's house to do an initial search? Did you encounter some sort of problem?" Klein nodded seriously and said, "Yes, I suspect that Madame Sharon is a member of the demonist sect." "A member of the demonist sect?" Dunn lowered the newspaper and ruminated over the words. He then asked seriously, "What did you discover?" Klein didn't sit down. He leaned his body forward and supported his weight with his hands holding the edge of the work desk. "First, I found a photo. There was a young man in the photo, but he looked very much like Madame Sharon. If he were to change into female clothing, put on makeup and Photoshop the picture a little, he would look exactly like Madame Sharon." Klein held back his urge to lampoon. "Similar to instigator Trissy?" Dunn's eyes sparkled as he was enlightened. They had previously predicted that Trissy was most likely a member of the demonist sect. "Yes." Klein nodded with mixed emotions as he continued. "I used divination to discover that Madame Sharon has a white bone statue in a hidden compartment in her safe. It's of an extremely beautiful woman, but her hair is very long to her ankles. Every single strand is as thick as a venomous snake. On the tips there were eyes. They looked rather creepy. Captain, is that the image of the primordial demoness?" As his security clearance was insufficient, the information about the demonist sect that he could read was very limited. Dunn recalled and nodded with a serious expression and said, "That's the image of the primordial demoness. We have to take action immediately and seize control of Madame Sharon." Klein immediately agreed and said, "If Madame Sharon is a mid-sequence beyonder from the demonist sect, I have to assume that she'll be able to tell that someone had sneaked into her bedroom." Then he suddenly felt puzzled as he blurted, "Captain, why do the 7 Orthodox gods only have symbols without any actual image, while the evil gods that I'm currently aware of have anthropomorphic appearances? The true creator and the primordial demoness are examples. Is this one of the differences between Orthodox gods and evil gods? Why would there be such a difference?" Klein added inwardly, but he wisely didn't say it out. "That's one of the differences between Orthodox gods and evil gods." Dunn gave a reassuring answer. Then he got up and walked towards the clothes rack. He said, "Let's not delay any further. I'm worried that Madame Sharon will run away." Then Dunn paused. "Go upstairs to get Kenley. With the 3 of us taking action together, we can apply for one sealed artifact. Madame Sharon is very likely higher than a sequence 7 beyonder." "Captain, you're so wise." Klein answered without hesitation, "All right." Then he asked curiously, "Captain, which sealed artifact are you going to use?" Dunn weighed his words before he answered, 3-0217. As there weren't many sealed artifacts behind Tingen City's Chinese gate, Klein quickly remembered what Captain wanted to use. Number 0217. Name, Spirit Medium's Mirror. Danger grade 3. Considerably dangerous. Has to be used carefully. It can only be requested for operations that require 3 or more people. Security classification. Official Nighthawk member or above. Sealed method. Store in absolute darkness. Description. The back of the mirror is plated in mercury. The front of the mirror has 3 minor cracks. The very first investigator that looked into the mirror saw a sobbing girl with long hair. Then he discovered the girl climbing out of the mirror. From many experiments with the artifact, the image that's reflected in the mirror is different most of the time. Even if the same person uses it repeatedly, they would encounter different things of varying danger levels. But they would prioritize dealing with the person who looked at the mirror first. The most dangerous situation is to see oneself in the mirror. If no one looks at the mirror under the prerequisite of there being light, an image would surface automatically every 3 hours. It doesn't possess any living traits. Remark. The mirror originally belonged to a spirit medium and was a very ordinary mirror until one day the spirit medium committed suicide when looking into it. Indeed, that there aren't many sealed artifacts behind Cheney's gate that can be used in a Beyonder battle. 3-0217 is a good choice. Klein didn't speak further as he immediately ran to the Nighthawks recreation room to get Sleepless Kenley. That night was Royale's turn to be on duty at Cheney's gate. Leonard was off duty, Sikatron was patrolling areas like Raphael Cemetery, and the new member would only arrive on Sunday. Hence, Dunn could only pick from Fry and Kenley. Taking into consideration that Madame Sharon was from the demonist sect and had little to do with dead spirits, he had opted for the latter. After a few minutes, Dunn returned from the basement. He held the mirror that was tightly wrapped in a thick black cloth. Frankly speaking, if I didn't know beforehand, I wouldn't be able to tell that it's a mirror. None of it is exposed. Klein went forward with the petite-sized Kenley. You're in charge of using sealed artifact 3-0217. Dunn passed the mirror to Kenley. Upon seeing that, Klein suddenly realized that he was a Sequence 8 Beyonder and that he possessed the ability to fight head-on. He couldn't just hide by the side as support. Man, I'm a little nervous. He touched the slumber charms in his pockets and made sure that he was well prepared. The only problem is that in order to make it easier to climb, I'm not bringing my cane. I can borrow Kenley's. He has the mirror in one hand and a gun in the other. That should be sufficient. Amidst Klein's thoughts, the trio arrived downstairs and took a carriage to Osna Street. On their way there, Kenley looked at the sealed artifact 3-0217 in his hands. He sighed from the tension. This is the first time I've been involved in such a dangerous operation. Normally, the Nighthawks wouldn't use any sealed artifacts to deal with Beyonder incidents. When they went to Morristown, they had applied for the mutated sun's sacred emblem for preventive purposes. Given how far away Morristown was, it would have taken backup some time to arrive if they needed it. This time they were almost certain that their target was a mid-sequence Beyonder. Don't worry, perhaps Madame Sharon has already fled, Klein replied with a smile. Honestly, he was just as tense as Kenley. Dunn's eyes turned and looked at him helplessly. Let's try not to let Madame Sharon escape. About 20 minutes later, the three Nighthawks arrived at Osna Street. They saw the garden and Madame Sharon's house in the darkness. The house lay in silence as though nothing had happened. Klein took out the pendulum in his left sleeve and made a quick divination. There's danger inside. There's danger inside. After he recited the statement 7 times, he opened his eyes and saw the topaz pendant spinning clockwise. The amplitude and speed were considered medium level. It meant that there was danger in there. Not very high, but it wasn't very low either. There's danger in there. Not very high, but it isn't very low either. This means that Madame Sharon is still in the building. She hasn't fled yet. Klein froze for a moment, quickly realizing the reason. He had entered a unique state by summoning himself to inspect the safe. He hadn't forcefully broken the lock when he was inspecting the secret compartment, nor did he activate any hidden traps. Thus, Madame Sharon wouldn't have discovered that her secret had been exposed. She would only think that there was a break-in, or some private investigator was checking on her to no avail. In such a situation, it was logical that she would continue to stay home. It made logical sense. To lose composure from a tiny matter and overreact wasn't the Madame Sharon whom Klein had come to understand. She was a calm socialite who was capable of acting afraid and pitiful, as well as a Beyonder member of the demonist sect who had kept her identity hidden for many years. If the telephone had been invented, Madame Sharon definitely would have called one of her lovers and complained about the security in Tingen City whilst hinting that it was Madame Maynard. Klein began imagining a melodramatic plot. He told Dunn and Kenley the results of his divination as well as his guess. That's the most reasonable deduction. Dunn pressed down on his hat as he looked at the second floor of Madame Sharon's apartment. There's no need for us to rush in. Why? Kenley, who was holding sealed artifact 3-0217, instinctively asked. He was filled with fear towards the spirit medium mirror in his hands. He was afraid that some unexpected event would arise from the sealed artifact. Dunn wore his black gloves and looked at Klein. Do you still remember what happened when we tried to capture instigator Trissy? I remember, Klein replied after some thought. She seemed to be able to detect our presence and make the necessary responses, which resulted in her successful escape. I also remember suggesting the use of bombarding the house when the captain asked me how I would deal with the situation. That was the safest, most surefire method. But not this time. We can't use it here as there are many innocent maids in Madame Sharon's house. If we notified them in advance and got them to evacuate, that would definitely catch Madame Sharon's attention. According to Leonard, Trissy could turn invisible. We have to assume that Madame Sharon has that ability too. Klein connected the dots at once. Dunn looked at the crimson moon in the sky and said, Good, your answer is very good. You're rather intuitive in such situations. We cannot approach recklessly and end up alarming Madame Sharon. I'll try dragging her into a dream from a distance. If I'm successful, you and Kenley will go and capture her. Well, you can make the decision of whether to kill her or not. Kill her if you cannot control her. Your safety is of utmost importance. Captain, your line of thought is always so clear at such critical moments. I was just waiting for you to say that. Klein praised in his heart. Over the months, Klein had grasped most of the unique traits of the different Beyonder powers of his partners when he was casually chatting with Dunn, Leonard, Fry and the rest. Amongst those, Dunn Smith, who was a nightmare, could freely enter the dreams of a sleeping person even though he was at home or at the Blackthorn Security Company. But how he did it was a secret of his own sequence, and Klein didn't ask about it too deeply. The ability to drag someone into a dream had a limited range and was normally used during direct confrontations. But Klein had once heard the captain say that the ability also had a certain effect when used within a 100-meter radius. But he needed time to complete the process. He couldn't do it instantly, for the process was similar to coaxing a child to sleep. At this moment, Dunn was going to drag the distant Madame Sharon into a sleeping state, a little at a time. After completing the first stages of the restraint, he was going to create the most opportunistic conditions for Klein and Kenley. All right. Kenley was also rather accepting of the captain's plan. Without any more chatter, Dunn leaned on the corner of a wall and shut his eyes. He put his hands together and lowered his head. His black windbreaker and silk hat blended into the night. In the opulent bedroom, Madame Sharon was leaning on her comfortable rocking chair, completely naked. Her fair and excellent figure was completely exposed. She sometimes turned her head towards the full-length mirror to admire her charming self. As she looked, her face would flush red as tears welled in her eyes. Her expression emitted a strange tenderness amidst her stupor. The skeletal statue of the goddess was sitting on the table beside her. The thick strands of hair seemed gentle under the warm, pink light. Slowly, the frequency in which Madame Sharon looked into the mirror decreased. Bit by bit, her eyelids couldn't help but droop. Seconds turned into minutes when Klein suddenly recalled something. How was the captain going to notify Kenley and himself after he successfully dragged Madame Sharon into a dream? Madame Sharon would wake up if the captain left his nightmare state, and she would notice that something was off. I wonder if the captain is capable of giving hand signs while dreaming at the same time? Klein looked at the worried Kenley pacing around and intended to discuss this with him in order to distract him. At that moment his mind turned into a blur. He saw a giant crimson moon as well as Captain Dunn Smith in his black windbreaker under the moon. There was also the short Kenley, his expression dazed. Klein realized that he too was dreaming. I've been dragged into a dream by the captain. So that's how he was going to notify us. He wanted to facepalm himself, but could only maintain his trance-like state while saying muddle-headedly, "Captain?" Dunn nodded slightly and said, "Madame Sharon has entered a dream. You can take action now." He then emphasized, "Remember to be careful and don't be too reckless. We would rather miss the opportunity than take unwarranted risks." Just as he finished his sentence, the world before Klein shattered. His eyes reflected Dunn Smith again. He was still at the corner of the wall, looking down with his hands clenched tightly into fists. On the other side, Kenley, who had stopped pacing about, also opened his eyes. The duo exchanged looks and nodded. Both of them entered a state to execute their operation. Even though this was the first time Kenley was participating in a relatively dangerous mission, he was still more experienced than Klein. He had attended many official missions, so he quickly adjusted his mental state, becoming calm and sharp. Of course, this could also be attributed to the augmentation the knight had on a sleepless. This was also one of the reasons Dunn had chosen Kenley over Fry for this operation. "Let's go." As a Sequence 8, Klein took on the role of the leader, signaling for his partner to follow. Kenley didn't object. He gripped the tightly wrapped mirror and softened his footsteps as he followed. Klein led him to the place where he scaled the wall previously. He grabbed onto the crevices of the wall and made it to the top of the wall with little effort. He maintained his ridiculous sense of balance and turned around, bending down and grabbing the spirit medium mirror Kenley had tossed over. The moment he touched the mirror, Klein felt his spiritual perception tighten suddenly. It was as if what was covered by the black cloth wasn't a mirror, but a door to some unknown, dangerous alternate world. Indeed, any item that requires sealing has some malefic side to it. Klein internally muttered to himself wistfully as he watched Kenley scale the wall. In order to facilitate movement, Kenley had placed his cane beside Dunn. Klein didn't dwell on that matter. After making their way through the garden to the side of the building, he climbed the pipe up to the balcony of the second floor just as he did before. He then hung naturally from his feet, allowing his body to fall, once again taking sealed artifact 3-0271. Kenley looked at him puzzled. But immediately he nodded his head in enlightenment. At that moment, Klein was shocked by his own actions. He exerted a force using his waist, and with the support of his left hand he easily flipped over. What happened just now? Why did I move like that? Felt so natural. Is that an ability of the clown? He thought back and felt that he was able to better display the unique characteristics of a clown in actual practice. After waiting for Kenley to easily make his way up, Klein handed the spirit medium mirror back to him before pulling open the unlocked door of the balcony. Kenley carefully pulled away the black cloth wrapped around sealed artifact 3-0271. He pointed the object mirror side down, reflecting the tiles on the ground. One of the rules of the spirit medium mirror was not to use it on yourself or your partners. After putting away the black cloth, Kenley took out his revolver and followed behind Klein. They made their way past the corridor towards Madame Sharon's bedroom, their footsteps light. Klein wielded his readied revolver, and while activating his spirit vision, he reached out for the door handle with his left hand. He didn't dare to be careless since his divination told him that there would be danger present. The reason why he didn't make another quick divination was that he knew the presence of the primordial demoness statue in the room. At this distance, his divination would definitely be interrupted. He knew that there was no way for him to get a clear answer without relying on the gray fog's obstruction. Furthermore, with Kenley beside him, there was no way for him to enter that mysterious space. After pushing open the door, what entered Klein and Kenley's field of vision was the warm light from the gas lamp. Then they saw Madame Sharon slumped over her chair as well as her alluring body. However, Madame Sharon wasn't asleep. She was reclined in her chair with a faint smile across her mouth, looking straight at her two visitors. Instinctively, Kenley flipped his palm and pointed the spirit medium mirror at Madame Sharon. Klein first froze, then exclaimed, "No." He clearly remembered that there was a full-length mirror on the other side of the chair. But it wasn't there now. The spirit medium mirror had locked onto Madame Sharon in just a second. But that image of Madame Sharon became blurry before turning into a full-length mirror. Kenley looked at himself in the mirror and also sealed artifact 3-0271 reflecting his own image. A figure instantly appeared within the spirit medium mirror. It was an expressionless, sinister image of Kenley himself. Klein felt his limbs turn rigid as if he had been entangled by invisible threads. An elegant figure appeared beside the full-length mirror. It was Madame Sharon wearing a nightgown. She glanced at the two intruders and chuckled. "If it wasn't for the fact that the statue happened to be beside me, I should be deep asleep now, waiting for you to wake me up with a kiss." At that moment, Klein suddenly shouted a simple term in ancient Hermes, "Crimson." He had no idea when he dug his left palm into his pocket. He deftly flicked his fingers and tossed out a slumber charm. The silver charm suddenly turned ice cold, just like a crystal coat with layers of frost. Klein shivered and suddenly became more alert. His fear and agitation temporarily froze. He quickly injected his spirituality into the charm and pushed the thin silver piece out of his pocket with his fingertip, causing it to drop to his feet. A crimson flame appeared in the air and the sound of light, continuous explosions echoed in the room. A serene and deep feeling instantly emanated and engulfed most of the bedroom, including Madame Sharon, sleepless Kenley, and also Klein himself. The slumber charm was an item that didn't distinguish between the enemy and the caster. In most situations, using it meant throwing it at the enemy. That way, the caster would only be affected by the remnant shockwaves, but not to the extent of failing to resist the temptation of falling into a deep sleep. But Klein's arms were entangled by countless invisible threads. He couldn't throw the charm, so he could only exchange Madame Sharon's slumber with his. But he had long considered such a situation and was prepared. This was because his body was unique, a uniqueness that was unlike most low-sequence beyonders. In that instant, Klein's eyelids closed and entered into deep sleep normally, while Madame Sharon and Kenley also appeared to slow down. Klein quickly realized that he was in a dream and rationally knew that he was sleeping. Whenever anything related to dream invasions or similar hypnotic effects were used on him, he could still maintain consciousness. He had discovered this when he was dealing with Dunn's nightmare powers, as well as when Daly was channeling his spirit. Klein tore out of the dream forcefully and woke up. He felt the countless threads binding his arms, legs, and body loosen. As for Madame Sharon, she had a vacant look, as though she was going to shake off the effect of the slumber charm but had yet to wake up entirely. Kenley was on the ground with the spirit medium mirror flipped upside down nearby, while his revolver had been flung to the door. An opportunity. Klein seized the moment while the fine threads loosened. He took out his left hand and snapped his fingers. He lit up a faint blue spiritual flame and burned the countless fine threads before him. At the same time, he picked up his revolver with his right hand and pulled the trigger repeatedly. Bang! Bang! The two silver demon-hunting bullets tore through the barrel and fired towards Madame Sharon. Klein didn't confirm the outcome but bent his knees, exerted strength in his waist and leaped over to Kenley. Simultaneously, he broke the fine strings that were tied around his body. His earlier shots were mainly to inform the captain that something unexpected had happened inside. They were already fighting and were in need of assistance. Of course, if he could shoot Madame Sharon directly, that'd be the best outcome. However, Klein didn't believe a sequence 7 or 6 Beyonder could be taken care of so easily. There were faint blue flames twirling in the air, dancing across the fine threads in the room. In such a dreamy scenery, the two silver demon-hunting bullets struck Madame Sharon's body. Madame Sharon was in her translucent sleeping robe, and her indistinct body shattered like the crimson moon's reflection in a lake. The full body mirror next to her cracked into pieces, and most of them shattered into about thumbnail-sized chunks while a small amount remained on the frame. They all resembled palms, strangely shaped palms. A substitute? A beyonder power of the demoness sequence? The corner of Klein's eyes swept over it as he already rolled next to Kenley. Since the fine strings were all broken by his movement, the faint blue flames didn't spread over. At that moment Madame Sharon had vanished, but the sleeping Kenley lifted his hands and gripped his neck so tightly that his saliva began flowing out as his tongue protruded. But he didn't seem like he was going to stop. But in Klein's spirit vision, there weren't any abnormal things around. He suddenly recalled the description of sealed artifact 3-0271. The most dangerous situation is when you see yourself. Could it be that Kenley saw his own reflection in sealed artifact 3-0271 through the full body mirror? Klein speculated. He quickly took out another silver charm without having the luxury of time to think about it. It was a triangular-shaped item, a requiem charm. Crimson. Klein said the ancient Hermes word while he instilled his spirituality into the charm and threw it out. Then he pressed down his left hand and grabbed the spirit medium mirror. He used the corner of his eye to determine that the sealed artifact was facing downward so it wouldn't reflect himself. The triangular silver charm ignited into icy blue flames. The gentle and serene darkness blanketed Kenley and affected Klein himself. The nervous emotions dispersed in that instant. Kenley relaxed his hands on his throat, while Klein felt like he was standing before his oriel window at home, overlooking the quiet streets. His physical and mental state was at peace. That was exactly what Klein wanted. At that very moment he entered an extremely serene state. He appeared to be the only person left in the entire world with nothing else in existence. Within this sense of calmness he suddenly had a gut feeling in his mind. Madame Sharon is about to attack my right waist. That was the foresight ability of a clown in battle. Without any hesitation, Klein lifted the spirit medium mirror and rolled to his left. Just as he moved, a dagger burning in dark flames pierced the spot where he had stood earlier. Madame Sharon's figure was outlined once again. As he rolled, Klein suddenly lifted the spirit medium mirror and pointed it at Madame Sharon. Besides saving his teammate, his main goal when he got close to Kenley was to pick up the sealed artifact. Otherwise, he didn't believe that anything good would come out of waiting for the captain's reinforcements while being next to Madame Sharon. The flaring sun charm could be used to fight against a beyonder, but the effect wouldn't be as significant as if it was used against a dead spirit. Plus, the other person wouldn't just stand there and wait for him to use a charm. If it really didn't work, Klein could only take the risk and use Azek's copper whistle. Regarding how he would explain it, he would think about it after he managed to stay alive. However, things developed better than Klein had predicted. Madame Sharon opted for assassination. She didn't interrupt his use of the requiem charm and the spirit medium mirror. Therefore, Klein had instantly formulated a simple plan. He didn't avoid the repercussions of the requiem charm but relied on it to enhance his foresight ability as a clown. Then he seized the opportunity to dodge the attack while he used the spirit medium mirror to reflect the enemy. When Madame Sharon missed her strike, she immediately wanted to chase after her agile opponent who was rolling away. She suddenly saw a mirror with 3 cracks. The surface of the mirror rippled and a woman's figure appeared. Her hair was black and thick, hanging low and blocking her face. Klein's left hand shook, and the spirit medium mirror glided on the carpet for a dozen centimeters with the front facing upwards. A pale hand extended out of the mirror, and a woman in a white bedsheet-like dress climbed out of the mirror quickly and pounced at Madame Sharon. Madame Sharon's expression became gloomy. There was a layer of darkness above her innocent brown eyes. Her surroundings ignited with 7 black flames. With a swoosh, a black flame flew out and hit the woman in the white dress. Whoosh! The woman caught on fire and wailed in pain. Very soon she vanished into thin air. So, The black flames flew at Klein one after another like bullets. Klein's pupils constricted as he quickly rolled away. He didn't dare stay in that spot. However, his action of rolling gradually became slower because there seemed to be fine threads entangling him again. They slowed him down and affected his motion. It seemed like the nemesis of the clown's combat abilities. The black flames flew past Klein's face and fell onto Madame Sharon's bed. However, it didn't burn, seemingly effective on items with life or spirituality. Klein had yet to feel rejoice over his successful dodge when another premonition flashed through his head. He twisted his spine and changed his forward flip into a side roll. A transparent ice crystal suddenly appeared like a spear and stabbed into the carpet where Klein had originally intended to land. The white frost expanded and struck Klein, whose actions were affected by the fine threads. He suddenly shivered and his body became stiff. Although he could still move, he was much slower. Madame Sharon had black flames surrounding her again, and there was a transparent ice spear that condensed in her hands. Klein didn't hesitate any further as he shoved his hand into his pocket and grabbed Isaac's copper whistle. He. Just then Kenley shook off the effect of the requiem and slumber charms. He got up and looked towards Madame Sharon with a pair of vacant-looking eyes. His face seemed to be blanketed by a shadow, making him look silent yet creepy. Thud. Kenley leaped at Madame Sharon, who was the closest. Madame Sharon narrowed her eyes and shot the black flames surrounding her one after another at Kenley. Poof. Poof poof. The black flames disappeared like snowflakes and didn't have any effect. Klein was stunned at first. Then he lifted the gun in his right hand and pulled the trigger while aiming at Madame Sharon. Bang! Madame Sharon dodged ahead of time and threw the frost spear towards Kenley, but it only penetrated his clothes and not his skin. Hence, it didn't create a freezing effect. Bang! Klein fired again, and Madame Sharon dodged to the side of the broken full-body mirror and picked up a palm-sized fragment. She continued to walk swiftly and dodged another bullet. She then used the irregular fragment to reflect Kenley as he leaped over at her. Right on the heels of that, Madame Sharon dodged to the side as she swiped the mirror with her palm, which was covered in black flames. At that moment Klein had emptied his revolver. He had no choice but to throw it, letting the empty shells and revolver fall to the carpet. Just as he rolled over to pick up Kenley's revolver, he heard his teammate's tragic scream. Kenley stopped before bending over and vomiting. It was bile at first, then a red heart, followed by his lungs and stomach that were burning with black flames.